I had been looking forward to that fishing trip for weeks. I'm a history teacher at a private school here in Shillong, and every so often, I need to escape the weight of dusty old books and the unrelenting monotony of lesson plans. The river just outside the city seemed like the perfect retreat, a good chance to clear my mind and reel in a few copper masir. The journey took about an hour and a half on my Royal Enfield. With the wind in my face and my fishing gear strapped to the back, I rode through winding mountain roads, leaving behind the familiar and inching closer to a more rugged solitude. Finally, I reached the bridge over the river. The mist rose gently from the water below, wrapping everything in a mysterious, ethereal shroud. I parked my bike and began the short trek downstream to a spot I'd heard was good for fishing. As I walked, I became vaguely aware of something odd. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or rather several people, were walking with me. The unmistakable sound of multiple footsteps echoed mine, sometimes in perfect unison, sometimes slightly offbeat. I brushed it off as an echo. These hills have a strange way of warping sounds, or so I told myself. I was here to fish, and besides, I was alone, or so I believed. The riverbank looked ideal, with calm waters and the occasional ripple promising fish below. I cast my line and, surprisingly, the fish were biting. One after another, they nibbled and fell prey to my bait, and soon I had 12 plump copper masir in my cooler. I cast out again, anticipating a 13th to complete the haul. But as I felt the familiar tug on the line, something strange happened. A chilling whisper, a voice almost too soft to hear, sounded right beside my right ear. The hairs on my neck shot up, and my hands jolted. I yanked the line too hard, sending the fish flying from the water. It flailed wildly, its shimmering body twisting in midair before landing tangled on a tree branch just above my head. The whisper intensified, wrapping around me like an icy grip. It wasn't just the whisper now, it was an unearthly presence pressing close, and the words, though still indistinguishable, sounded almost angry, even accusatory. My breath caught in my throat, and a cold sweat prickled down my back. I couldn't see anyone, couldn't make out any form, but the sense of being watched, surrounded, was overpowering. Panic shot through me. I fumbled for my blade, cut the tangled fishing line, leaving the unfortunate fish hanging there, and threw every fish I'd caught back into the river. I packed up as fast as I could, my hands trembling. I turned back up the trail, practically running up the hill toward the bridge where I'd left my motorcycle. But the footsteps returned, this time louder, faster, matching my pace as if someone's were running alongside me, closing in. I dared not look back, too terrified of what I might see, or worse, what I might not see. Finally, I reached my bike. I leapt onto it, started the engine, and sped off down the road. The rhythmic thumping of the engine grounded me somewhat, but my pulse didn't steady until I saw a row of small roadside shops up ahead, where a few vendors were standing. I stopped, desperate for the company of another human, and approached one of the vendors, a woman with a kindly but weary face. I tried to explain what happened, my voice shaking as I recounted the footsteps, the whisper, the feeling of not being alone. Her expression darkened, and she looked down, almost as if in silent prayer. "What you experienced isn't uncommon," she said, her voice low. "That river, some say it's haunted. People hear things, feel things, sometimes even see things that don't make sense. No one knows why it's this way, only that it's best not to go alone, or to take anything from that place." Her words chilled me to the bone. As I rode home, her last words echoed in my mind, leaving me with an unshakable unease. Whatever it was by that river, it felt like something ancient, something beyond my understanding, yet terrifyingly close. And to this day, I'm haunted by a question that lingers unanswered each time I pass that river. What was it that followed me home? There's something about fishing in the hills that has a way of pulling you into another world, a world that seems untouched and timeless. I'm from a village in northeast India, and fishing trips out to the river with my friend were some of our favorite escapes. It was the season of flying termites, the time of year when mahseer fish are especially eager to bite. My friend and I had prepared carefully, collecting a big batch of those winged insects, knowing the fish would find them irresistible. We started our trek early, around noon. The river was a solid 2-hour hike from the village, deep in the hills, and when we reached it, we felt that familiar, thrilling rush. It was as if the whole river had been waiting for us. Without wasting any time, we cast our lines, and as we'd hoped, the fish were biting almost instantly. Within minutes, we had a string of wriggling mahseer in our cooler, the two of us grinning and cheering as we reeled in fish after fish. It was a perfect day, with nothing but the sound of the river and the joy of catching one fish after another. As darkness started to close in, we decided it was time to head back. Satisfied with our haul, we packed our gear and began the grueling trek uphill. It was at least a 3-hour climb, and the steepness made each step feel like a battle. By the time we reached the familiar landmark, a rocky outcrop that marked the start of flatter ground, we were exhausted and sat down for a short rest. Finally, we made it to the village border around 11 p.m. To get back to the main part of the village, we had to pass through a small forested area. There were no streetlights here, only the moon casting pale light across our path, with the occasional help of our flashlights. A small stream ran alongside the path, bubbling quietly as it wound its way down the hill. As we moved deeper into the forest, I heard something faint, a giggle, soft and high-pitched, coming from the direction of the stream. It sounded like a child. Both of us stopped, shining our flashlights in the direction of the sound. But the only thing we saw was the silvery trickle of water, glistening in the moonlight. No one was there. We looked at each other, slightly unnerved but unwilling to let a little sound shake us. Shrugging it off, we turned back to the path, only to freeze. Standing in the middle of the road, directly in front of us, was a little girl. Her back was turned to us, her long black hair draped over a white gown that looked worn and old. She was so still, so eerily quiet, it was as if she had simply materialized there. My friend called out, his voice shaking a bit. "Little girl, what are you doing here in the middle of the night?" She didn't respond. She didn't even move. A chill crept up my spine as I looked closer. Something felt wrong, a dark energy that I couldn't quite place. And then, as my eyes traveled down her form, I noticed it. Her feet. Her feet were facing us, even though her back was turned. It was as if her body was twisted in a way that defied nature. My heart raced, and in a strangled whisper, I managed to say, "Her feet." My friend, sensing my alarm, shined his flashlight downward, and the light fell on those twisted, backward-facing feet. He gasped, the sound almost a whimper. We barely had time to think before panic took over. Dropping our flashlights, we sprinted past her, the air cold with terror and the sound of our heavy breathing filling the silent night. I didn't dare look back. It felt as though an icy gaze was searing into the back of my head as we ran. We didn't stop until we burst into the main part of the village, hearts pounding and lungs burning. There, under the warm glow of the village lanterns, we tried to catch our breath. Other villagers gathered around, alarmed by our pale faces and shaking hands. When we explained what had happened, the villagers exchanged worried glances. One of the elders, a woman with deep lines on her face, nodded knowingly. "You saw her," she said in a hushed voice. "They say spirits wander near water, especially in the forests. Some are benevolent, but others not so much." The villagers murmured amongst themselves, some crossing themselves, others staring out toward the forest with haunted expressions. No one knew exactly what the entity was, but it was well known among them that certain spirits, twisted and malevolent, were often found in the shadowed forests and by rivers. They say the hills are ancient, that the spirits have been here far longer than we have. And that night, I learned just how real those tales might be. To this day, when I pass that forested area, I quicken my pace. I never look toward the stream, and I keep my flashlight pointed firmly on the path ahead, unwilling to risk another glance at the darkness hiding just beyond the trees.